Canada is releasing more than 23 million barrels of oil to deal with the current global supply.
You sure about that?
I'm just asking this question on behalf of networks.
Right.
To deal with the current global supply challenges, what more do you think the government should be doing now?
Well, I'm not convinced they're releasing any additional oil. They have no oil to release. We don't have a strategic oil stockpile in Canada. We are the only G7 country without one.
That, of course, was Conservative leader and the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, at a scrum last week in Parliament Hill. Actually, no, he was in his, I think it was in Alberta when he did that. However, talking about the energy stockpile, which Canada doesn't have. But I've got Jeff Rath, a leading proponent of Alberta independence, on the show with me today, and he'll be joining us in about 2 or 3 minutes to talk about Pierre Poilievre's comments on Alberta separation during his huge, epic interview with Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan Experience. And we'll be talking a bit about how Jeff's thought that went for Pierre, what he thought the comments about separation were. And there are very few comments, actually, about Alberta independence. And it's almost like Joe Rogan had to remind himself to mention it at the very end. But, of course, we will be back in mere moments with more. So stay tuned, please.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
We're doing it live. And Sunday, we just went through a big snowstorm here again in Ottawa. It's supposed to be spring. They promised me spring is coming. But Jeff Rath will be joining us shortly when we're talking about the Joe Rogan interview with Pierre Poilievre and the state of Alberta independence. You're hearing a lot of things contrary-wise, and we'll have a look at 2 particular polls while we're talking about it. But I wanted to, talking about the energy stockpile that Canada doesn't have. We have no energy reserve. We have no petroleum reserve. We have trouble even selling it, of course, or moving it anywhere in Canada or outside of Canada, except to the United States, because we have no pipeline to British Columbia, and that's been a nagging concern of Alberta. One of the reasons support for Alberta independence is so high. So, of course, that's interesting. But the war in Iran, whoops, can't say that WAR word this early in the show. The incident in Iran, we'll call it that because we're not supposed to be talking about such things. Energy lockdown had started around the world. I mean, this is going to mean big bucks at the gas station. And somebody told me the other day they bought gas in Victoria, BC, which I'm very familiar with. I used to go to Victoria once a month, at least, when I lived in Comox, Vancouver Island. $2.10 a liter. And that was a couple of days ago. And I understand it's up to $2.25 a liter now, which is what the U.S. was paying for a gallon for gas not too long ago. So these are frightening times, absolutely frightening times. But for some reason, these frightening times are not having any impact on Prime Minister Mark Carney. His Liberals are now 11 points above.
Glorified resource colony for the British, the city of London. And the reality is now that the British are under a lot of strain. The city of London is under a lot of financial pressure. It sees places like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And what do you do if you have financial issues? Well, you do corporate restructuring, right? You change the middle management, right? And historically, the British got along very well with the Indian elite, right? They went into India and stole trillions of dollars from the Indians, and the Indian elite were perfectly happy to help them, right? So why not use the same model for Australia, for Canada? So, there are millions of Indians who immigrated to Canada in the past 5 years, and it's put a lot of strain on the Canadian economy because housing prices are have exploded, and so ordinary Canadians can no longer afford to buy a house, and it's put tremendous pressure on the Canadian welfare system, on the Canadian economy. And you would think that the proper strategy would have a moratorium where they're like, you know what, we've had too many immigrants and we need to close the borders and absorb these immigrants because we want to ensure that these immigrants have proper housing, they have decent jobs, right? You would think that that'd be the right strategy.
Yes.
But instead, Mark Carney goes to India and says, we want more Indians. And also, we'll give you scholarships to come to Canada to study for free. Meanwhile, there are a lot of Canadians who are homeless, who are unemployed, and who cannot put food on the table. But hey, we want more Indians. So if it's not corporate restructuring, if it's not trying to asset strip Canada.
So of course that was the ubiquitous Professor Jiang, who's on just about everybody's show right now, including Tucker Carlson, who was there this week, and talking about immigration. That's another issue for Alberta. Alberta wants to control its immigration. Canada has taken in way too many immigrants. Pierre Poilievre of the day seems to think that's just fine because we all get along in Canada. And before we bring Jeff on, I want to show this clip because it is it's mind-boggling. It's all I can say. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
Canadian.
Yeah. But you know, the great thing about Canada is we've always sorted our shit out peacefully. Like the Protestants and Catholics tore each other's eyeballs out in Europe for like hundreds of years, and then we came to Canada and we just got along. And that's the great thing about Canada is like you can come, you know, Muslims and Jews, Hindus and Sikhs. They come to Canada and they just get along. They come to Canada and they just get along.
Grewal was killed. The 45-year-old moved to Canada in 2018. Grewal was outspoken and active on social media with thousands of followers, vocal in her opposition to the Khalistan movement.
They come to Canada and they just get along. They come to Canada and they just get along. We live on the same streets. Eventually, we all start intermarrying, and it's a great thing about Canada.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to bring Jeff on that note because, Jeff, I watched this debate live, if you will, because it was in the can. They recorded this. And I almost think that Pierre put down a lot of stipulations before they even started this interview because, well, we'll get into that later. But this is the clip that a lot of people have said, what country is Pierre Poilievre living in? Like, we're all getting along. Yeah. We've got Muslims and Jewish folks fighting in the streets of Toronto. And Poilievre, of course, is a huge backer of the Khalistanis in Canada, even though they're extremely violent. And India is not very much of a fan of these people. But we've got Pierre Poilievre suggesting, and when he's prime minister, we're going to have direct flights to Amritsar in the Punjab. From Toronto. And I mean, we don't have direct flights to a lot of Canadian cities. Try to get to Kelowna, let alone Amritsar. But I found this incredible, Jeff. And I'll start with that. And I'll show what I think is Poilievre's best moment with the Joe Rogan debate. But what did you think overall of Poilievre's performance? I mean, politically, I don't think he could have lost. We had the CBC, CTV pundits, the usual suspects, saying, oh, it's risky for Pierre to do this. Risky. You know, a 2.5 hour, 3 hour interview, he could make mistakes. And I was saying, come on, people. He's got nothing to lose. He's 11 points behind Carney. He's got to reach out to the base somehow, go on the Joe Rogan show and do it. So what did you think overall of his performance?
Oh, I thought he was delusional. I mean, let's face it. I mean, everybody in Canada, we just get along. I mean, your clip summed it up, right? I mean, you know, and even like his whole, and we all just intermarried. I mean, I remember having a poli-sci prof when I was in school that was talking about, you know, growing up in Toronto in the 50s. And I mean, Woodward stores are gone now, but I mean, Woodward's used to have signs in the window saying help wanted, Jews, blacks, and Catholics need not apply. Right? I mean, we've never always gotten along. I mean, there's always been underlying, you know, ethnic and religious tensions in this country. And they're all now just being massively exacerbated by this complete flood of, you know, I call them third worlders, but, you know, people from cultures other than our own who don't like us, don't like each other, It's like we had this thing in Northeast Calgary not too long ago where two factions of Eritreans on different sides of the Eritrean civil war were going at one another with clubs and sticks, like 300 of them. And I mean, my comment to a buddy of mine at the time was, well, I guess the only good thing is Trudeau didn't let them bring their AK-47s over, right? I mean, it's ridiculous what's been going on. And, Pierre's completely out of touch. He's part of the problem. He's a World Economic Forum globalist who doesn't see any of this being a problem. All of the major political parties in Canada are in the pockets of, the multi-billionaire, multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. Like what is it, C3 Capital that owns Tim Hortons. I mean, Tim Hortons has been flooding Alberta with people from the third world under that international mobility program scam, where for $280 and a job offer, people can just come into Canada. So literally, these recruiters will go off to India or wherever, Sri Lanka, whatever, with a big stack of Tim Hortons letters of offer to these people, right? And, literally and they charge them a pile of dough, like 40, 50 grand Canadian. Here's your Tim Hortons letter of offer. Here's your, we'll pay the $280 fee, we'll buy you your plane ticket, whatever. And then they come over here and then they realize that under this program, they effectively become minimum wage indentured serfs at $15 an hour for the length of the visa. And I mean, we've got these people now committing suicide in Alberta because they just realize that they can't go home because they've sold everything they can, to pay these so-called immigration consultants that sold them the package along with the Tim Hortons offer, right? And they're literally wandering around the streets of Alberta at -30, like little small towns that they're flooding these people with to try to dilute the Conservative vote, wandering around these small towns with their heads down going, how did I get here, right? It's just like, it's awful.
Yeah. Well, I want to show, I spoke back on it. I want to show what I think was his best moment of the interview, because it harkened back to, which up until, I would say probably, maybe his best ever interview was with Rex Murphy in December 2023, and he invoked what he called the mind your own business party, and he went one step further here.
We are a free country, and we are a democracy. We have preserved that. My leader, I had this funny moment when Joe Biden came to Parliament Hill, and Mr. President, I'm Pierre Poilievre. I'm the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition. And he said, loyal opposition? How can you be loyal and opposition at the same time? It's like, what the hell are you talking about? And because you guys have a system based on a republic, whereas ours is the British system. And in our system, the opposition is an act of loyalty. That's what our system means. It means that if you are opposing the government, you're doing it out of loyalty to the good of the people. In our House of Commons, you have a half circle in your Congress. We have two sides in our Parliament. It's 2.5 sword lengths apart because they used to literally kill each other in the old English days. But the idea is the opposition is to prosecute the hell out of the government, make the mighty low. The most powerful people in the country are supposed to tremble every time they walk in that place because every mistake they made, every abuse of power, every corruption they might have done can be exposed and in front of all eyes. So our system is really designed to constrain the power of government through what we call Parliament. Like, I don't work for government, I work for Parliament, and Parliament works for the people. We call it the House of Commons because it's the House of the common people. It's green in there because they used to meet in the fields of England. And so I really view the role of our Parliament to limit the power of government, to maximize the power of the people, make people bigger, stronger, and more fulfilled by having the government narrowly focus on the things it's supposed to do. Roads, military, basic social safety net, borders, police, etc., but then leave people alone to live their lives. If I were to start a political party from scratch, it would be the mind your own damn business party. Just get the government to do its job well, do 4 or 5 things really well, and then let people live their lives.
Well, that sounds very reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that doesn't go along with that, anybody that's opposed to that doesn't even make sense.
No, look, like I said, the way I grew up and everything I've seen ever since, when I talk to farmers or factory workers, electricians, I find they know just as much or more than the so-called experts I encounter on Parliament Hill. Like back during COVID when all these governments were printing money. And all the politicians and bankers said, oh, this is great. Well, look at all this money we get to spend. I'd walk around communities and I'd have like mechanics say, you know, we're going to have inflation. And I would say, yeah, it makes sense to me. And I'd go back to Parliament Hill and the experts would all say, no, there's not going to be any inflation. And sure enough, all that money filtered into the economy, bid up all the goods we buy, and everybody got smoked with higher prices. But the point is that it was the common people who don't study this stuff for a living, who don't read endless reports and studies, who could just figure out that if there's money pouring into the economy that's not matched by goods and services, it's going to bid up the cost of everything. So that's my experience and my ideology is the common guy knows how to make his own decisions. We need to empower him to do that.
Now, I show that because, of course, that's one of the most popular things he ever said. But unfortunately, he's not leading the mind your own damn business part.
No.
And I found what I found amazing, Jeff, when I watched this 2.5 interview, just 2.5 hour interview, just over 2.5 hours, he managed to control the discussion for 45 minutes with Joe Rogan, where he basically took the mic away and started quizzing Joe Rogan about UFC, boxing, jiu-jitsu, kung fu, karate, and Bruce Lee for 45 minutes. And it's like, what about Bill C-8 and 9? What about Bill C-22, where the police are being given surveillance powers? What about the free speech disappearing in Canada? Pierre Poilievre kept telling Joe Rogan, Canada's just a wonderful place. And, I don't know why anybody's complaining. And I'm thinking, okay, you're there to sell Canada, you're there to sell trade deal. But then you go and say, and by the way, I'm texting Prime Minister Carney every day to let him know what I'm doing because, and he says this, we're both fighting for the same thing, which is Canada. And I'm saying, holy shit, excuse my language. Mark Carney's not. I know that. I'm not. My mind's not made up about Pierre Poilievre, but I know Mark Carney's not fighting for Canada. He's fighting for Brookfield. He's fighting for Mark Carney. He is sure as hell not fighting for Canada. The most
Carney's fighting for he's fighting for communist China. I mean, we know that. I mean, he's a Brookfield and communist China get along hand in glove. The Chinese communists are advancing Brookfield's interests, and Brookfield's advancing their interest. It's a very cozy little relationship. And Mark Carney is managing it for his financial benefit and the financial benefit of himself and Brookfield. It's not for Canada. Like, why did he enter into a strategic alliance with China? Why are we turning, we used to be concerned about Chinese secret police stations in Canada. Now we call them RCMP detachments. This is Canada under Mark Carney. It's really, really frightening. But I honestly don't believe that Pierre Poilievre is much better. I think I think they're all uniparty globalist shills that are just one, maybe if Pierre got elected, we, get our guns back or they wouldn't take our guns away, but that's not going to happen because he didn't have the guts to pull the trigger on Carney, before Christmas when he could have, right? Now, Carney's going to bribe his way to a majority government, one corrupt member of parliament at a time, right? And frankly, I hope he does. I hope Carney bribes 2 more Conservative or NDP MPs to cross the floor because that'll guarantee Alberta independence. Alberta will be volcanic in its anger the minute Mark Carney bribes his way, to a majority government. So, I'm looking forward to that. And then Pierre's little civics lesson. Let's get back to to him extolling the virtues of the Canadian House of Commons. Canada operates even in a minority government situation like an elected dictatorship. The minute you have anybody controlling the Prime Minister's office without effective opposition, and clearly Pierre is not effective opposition when you see Bill C-2, Bill C-8, all these horrible totalitarian pieces of legislation being passed and Pierre can't do anything about it. We live in an elected dictatorship. That's why so many people, myself included in the Alberta independence movement, want a new constitution for Alberta that completely dispenses with the Westminster parliamentary system and moves us to a bicameral system with like the US with an elected Senate based on regions of the province, elected legislature on population, an elected executive that actually has line item veto power, over spending of the legislature, and an elected attorney general and an elected auditor general that are specifically tasked with putting crooked politicians in jail, investigating them and putting them in jail. That's what we need.
Yeah. Well, I think it was politically smart to go on Joe Rogan. He should have done this during the last federal election.
He didn't have the guts to go down to do Joe Rogan during the election because it was an elbows up election, right? He didn't want to go down to Joe Rogan and say, hey, we think that we need to improve our relationship with the United States. Mark Carney's out to lunch, all this anti-American nonsense, trying to make overtures to the Europeans. All the love for Europe that Mark Carney has doesn't overcome, 150 years of history and actual geography, where our closest trading partner by road is the United States of America. Pierre Poilievre simply is a gutless coward who didn't have the balls to stand up to Carney in the last election and call out all the anti-American nonsense of Mark Carney, and was just as guilty of the Trump derangement syndrome nonsense or pandering to it as Mark Carney was. So that's why he didn't do Rogan during the election, was he didn't want to appear too pro-American, because the whole election was turning on, all of the phony tariff war that Trudeau and Carney started to get Carney elected.
Yeah,
and to me, it demonstrates a lack of leadership on Pierre's part, demonstrates a complete lack of principle, right? Demonstrates complete cowardice. And, as far as I'm concerned, he's not fit to lead. And I'm sure Carney wants to go there again. If we do have another election, he's gearing up for another elbows up campaign and wants to enlist. It looks like he has enlisted Pierre as as part of that. So, but and Pierre's become completely irrelevant. I mean, I guess we'll get into the whole thing about him. I say that he's got Alberta independence denial syndrome. Your viewers can figure out what the acronym for that would be. But again, Alberta independence denial syndrome. And, it's like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Well, he's completely out of touch with what's going on in Alberta. I mean, there's 7,000 canvassers knocking on every door in the province right now. And I was speaking to one yesterday that was out door knocking. And I said, how's it going? He said, oh, Jeff, he said, you wouldn't believe it. He said, I was out the other night, and he said, a third of the people at the doors won't sign because they've already signed the petition. He said a third of the people sign. And he said of the remaining third, maybe, there's probably 10 or 15% that don't want to sign because they don't want to put their name to something, so they don't have their bank account seized. And he says, maybe, 15 to 20% of hardcore, I'm a Canadian, blah, 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 right? So, this movement is on a massive upswell right now. I mean, just, these are all just anecdotal things. They don't count for much. But, I mean, I was out picking up Chinese at my favorite takeout place for my daughter and I the other night. And I was talking to the son of the owner of the restaurant who works there. And I said, hey, just quietly off the record, I said, have you signed the Alberta independence petition yet? And he laughs and he goes, hell yeah. He says, my whole family did, right? We don't want to live in Chinese communist Canada anymore. And, and I mean, that's where we're at. That poll, that ECOS poll, 41% in favor of independence. Yeah. That, how long ago was that? That was February 2nd. That was February 2nd. Yeah. So, that was, over a month and a half ago. The numbers, as far as I'm concerned, are going up. And there's a very simple reason for it, right? It's because Alberta independence has something to offer, right? No more federal income tax, no more GST, no more carbon tax, no more estate tax, no more threats of people's taxing their home equity away. No more idiotic having to wake up in the morning and be pissed off because Mark Carney is offering scholarships to hundreds of thousands of Indian students at the expense of Albertans, when for an Albertan to go to the University of Toronto to get an engineering degree, it's going to cost him $140,000. So Carney's taken our money to give scholarships to Indians when Alberta kids can't afford to go to U of T to study engineering. I mean, how despicable is that? Right? And again, just getting back to the benefits of independence, we know what the benefits of are. No more stupid regulations, no more waking up in the morning and watching some hapless, politician in Ottawa tell us how great our lives are when we know how badly things have deteriorated over the last number of years with their mismanagement, right? Yeah. So, and what do the elbows uppers have to offer people in Alberta to vote no to independence? okay, I'm gonna go vote no because I really want more of the same miserable shit, right? I'll go vote no now. You know, kids are coming out and signing. You know, I would say we probably got 70 or 80% of, you know, university age kids in Alberta that are voting yes, because they know it's the only way that they're going to be able to afford their own home. It's the only way they're going to have the future that their parents had, right? So, you know, we're very enthused about what's going on. And I think Pierre Poilievre, when he goes on Rogan to say it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, is just completely out of touch with what's going on in Alberta. But he's never here anyway, so he wouldn't know anyhow.
No, I wanted to show the clip here. And by the way, if you recall during the interview, like I said, 45 minutes of discussion on UFC and karate, mixed martial arts. I was amazed that Pierre Poilievre had the comprehension that he did of the subject area, and he actually claimed that he was going at one time in his life he was going to be a professional wrestler, which that's news to me. But he was apparently on the high school wrestling team.
It's something you can do in the company of men, you know.
And but here he is for 45 minutes talking about very arcane subject matter that most people, everybody knows about UFC, extreme fighting, and they know about boxing, as everybody knows about Bruce Lee. And I didn't know Pierre Poilievre had an encyclopedic knowledge of Bruce Lee's life and films, as he held forth for quite a while and quizzed Joe Rogan for literally 45 minutes of this interview. And it's like after this, they're winding down, and Joe Rogan says, "Oh yeah, gotta ask you about that Alberta independence thing." So this is how that happened.
You know, black bear hunting.
Yeah.
So it's like
there's a lot of great hunting. I don't hunt myself, but there's a ton of great hunting and a lot of hunters in Alberta.
Oh yeah. Well, there's talk about Alberta separating.
That won't happen.
What was that about?
It won't happen. Some people are frustrated, but there's some legitimate frustrations. But at the end of the day, Canada's going to be united. And Albertans, I'm born and raised Alberta, and Albertans are seriously patriotic Canadians.
Very patriotic.
Yeah, they're great people, hardworking.
Some of the nicest people you ever
They
run
are
across.
great people in
Hardy.
Alberta. They are a hardy people.
It's cold up there. They know how to survive.
Exactly. You got to be tough to survive the cold in
Yeah.
Canada. Carve a country like we have out of that cold weather on that big open land. But people just keep on going. And Alberta's got a real kind of rugged individualism.
Yes.
And people love their agriculture. There's great ranches in Alberta, beautiful grasslands in Saskatchewan.
Doesn't Brock Lesnar have a place up there?
Okay, I'm not even sure who Brock Lesnar is.
And it's so hard to watch. It's like every time you play one of those clips, I want to throw up in my mouth.
But it amazed me. I mean, here's Pierre Poilievre again, sort of saying, you know, I was born and raised in Alberta. I spent 21 years in Ottawa. I came back because I had to get a seat. We're not going to talk about that, But
don't forget, it's longer than 21 years because he was a junior staffer, like chauffeuring, people around for the Conservative Party in Ottawa. So, I mean, he spent most of his adult life in Ottawa, but, he was in high school he's like Carney, went to high school in Alberta and really hasn't been back since, other than, when he gets fired by the people in Ottawa that don't want him to represent him, then he has to come back to Alberta to get a seat.
So when Pierre Poilievre said, not going to happen about Alberta independence, how do you think, you probably hit the roof. Do you think most people
I was happy.
That?
I love it when people do stuff like that because, and I'll tell you why, honestly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Everybody, oh yeah, angry separatists. It's like, no, we're laughing our asses off because every time one of these Eastern Federalist politicians does something that's that dumb, right? It just reminds another 10,000 people to go out and sign the petition. I mean, people were angry, like, who the hell is he to tell us how we think? Like, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's lots of people that were offended by it. I wasn't because, of course, I'm still, we're still pushing as hard as we can to get to our 1 million signatures that's our goal for this campaign. So every time an Eastern politician says something really dumb like that, it just reminds another 10 or 15,000 Albertans to go out and sign the petition. We're happy that people do stuff like that. And again, we're happy to be dismissed. We're happy to be minimized. We're happy to be insulted because every time they do that, they demonstrate they don't have an argument. Like Pierre Poilievre, oh no, you notice he doesn't say Albertans aren't going to leave Canada because the benefits of staying in Canada by far outweigh the benefits of, being independent, right? They can't say that because it's not true, right? So all they've got is denial, right? So, all they've got is their Alberta independence denial syndrome, and it's not working for them. I mean, because everybody knows what the actual benefits of independence are. Like, they can go to albertaprosperityproject.com and download the value of freedom and see that in an independent Alberta, we're going to have a $47 billion a year fiscal capacity surplus when we're no longer dragging Quebec, Ontario, and the Maritimes around like a ball and chain, right? And I mean, think about that. Like, think about how, like, the $70 billion a year in all federal taxes and assessments that leave Alberta to go to the rest of Canada, right? We get, ostensibly, less than 10 back in cash and 10 in questionable services. But think about how the Alberta economy is going to boom with another 70 billion, or with the entire $70 billion staying in the province, right? I mean, that's economic stimulus like no region in the world has ever seen. And we haven't even factored that into the value of freedom model that we were using because we wanted to be as conservative as possible, right? Like Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon and I have become pretty good friends over the last little while. And he was telling us that the Parti Québécois economists have gone through the value of freedom document that we created. And their response was, wow, that document's really conservative. Like, you guys are going to be way better off than you've set out in that document. And I said, yeah, it's because we're Albertans and we tend to under-promise and over-deliver, right? Like, and we wanted the document to be as conservative as possible because we didn't want people attacking us and saying, oh, blah, 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 all those numbers are ridiculous or whatever. We've underestimated everything in that document. So we're confident that a free and independent Alberta is going to be one of the wealthiest, most successful countries in the world. We'll have the day we vote ourselves out of Canada, we're going to have the highest GDP per capita of any country in the world. I mean, we already have more barrels of oil per capita in Alberta than they have in Saudi Arabia. On what basis are we not going to be hugely successful without liberal politicians or World Economic Forum acolytes like Pierre Poilievre picking our pockets for $70 billion a year so they can give $15 billion a year to Quebec?
Well, it's interesting too, Jeff, that a lot of people were furious that just after this interview, he goes and has an audience with Bill Ackman.
Oh, you froze. Are you there? I lost you at Bill Ackman.
Bill Ackman. And of course, this is a guy who is just very involved in a whole surveillance network in the United States, very, very tuned in to the deep state. And people are saying, why did you do this, Pierre? Right after this interview, you got a lot of goodwill out of this on both sides of the border, and then you go meet with Bill Ackman. Your grassroots supporters don't like this. I don't think that was a smart thing to do. But it certainly buttresses what you just said about the image here looking very globalist, and that's not what he wanted to achieve out of this trip. And unfortunately, I think the Ackman meeting did not help him at all. But why is there? Well, I think I know the answer. It's almost rhetorical. Why is there a growing consensus in the Eastern media, the Central Canadian media, and pollsters that independence is just not going to happen because it's just going to be too hard? And here's a poll. A rock solid majority opposed to Alberta independence. This is Abacus data. My old friend David Coletto. I was surprised because his conclusion from this poll was that federalism is baked in Alberta, and there's just nothing that's going to stop this. There's nothing going to topple this baked in federalism. And some of the polls look good, but there's that rock solid, as he termed it, majority opposed to Alberta independence. I mean, obviously, do you think this is, once again, people in central Canada trying to make it look like Alberta independence is impossible and just don't even go there?
They're all suffering from AIDS. Alberta independence denial syndrome, right? I mean, that's what it is, right? It's like they think that, because it's the framework, that their brains are used to working in, they can't fathom the fact that Albertans are so fed up that we're ready to vote ourselves out of Canada. I mean, I was talking, and it's lots of stuff. Like, everybody has different reasons for wanting to leave. I was talking to a guy that lives in Battle River Crowfoot the other day, Pierre's constituency, and he was saying people in Battle River Crowfoot are really angry with Pierre because he won't even answer their letters about the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, our friends, the ostrich murderers, right? Wanting birth certificates on every calf born in Alberta, on every ranch in Alberta. People in Battle River Crowfoot, and I mean, that's the heart and soul of Alberta ranching country, right? Are furious over this. And Pierre Poilievre won't even answer their letters because, of course, for the globalists, they need to know where everything is. They want to know where every single bit of property is that we own. They want to be able not only account and freeze our bank accounts, they want to know where every single animal is on every one of our farms. So when they come in to murder them all, like they did with those ostriches, they've got an accurate count of all the animals that they get to slaughter, right? It's infuriating, and Poilievre is completely out of touch with the riding that he ran in, and people are getting progressively more and more pissed off with having some guy from Ottawa purporting to represent them. I mean, he's already said he's not going to run in Battle River Crowfoot again because he's going to, he'll try to find a safe seat in Toronto or in and around Ottawa again because he's not home here. He doesn't feel at home here. We don't like him here. We don't want him here. He's just another Federalist.
Yeah, it's interesting that you'd bring up the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, because I hear this all the time from my friend Katie Pasitne of Universal Ostrich Farms. And of course, Pierre Poilievre was not there to stop the CFIA from the invasion, occupation, massacre at the farm, did nothing about that. CFIA is getting worse, and it's expanding its parameters.
They want a birth certificate on every calf born in Alberta. Next, I'm going to have to register every foal born on my farm to every one of my horses. They want to know where every bit of it's just, again, it's this, globalist control where they want to know and have it digitized and in a computer system where every bit of our property is at all times, right? So that they can come and take it away so that we can own nothing and be happy. Make no mistake. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Pierre's not on our side on it. Like, it's the same way he ran in the last election. And I've said this more than once. It's like, hey, Pierre, I've got a suggested campaign slogan for you. If you're running in Alberta, no more equalization for Quebec and a micro dairy in every barn, right? Of course, he won't do that. He supported equalization through the last election. He supported the dairy cartel and the dairy mafia. I mean, Quebec barely has twice the population of Alberta now, but they have 10 times the dairy licenses of Alberta. We have 400. They have over 4,000. And again, Pierre won't internalize the fact that is a major irritant to Alberta ranchers. I mean, if you're raising beef, and your wife or your kid or you yourself want to have some Holsteins or some dairy cows in one of your barns and, set up a food inspected, micro dairy operation, why the hell shouldn't you be allowed to do it? Why are working poor, and that it's progressively becoming more and more of us working poor, why are we being forced to spend $10 a pound for butter, $8 for 2 liters of milk, et cetera, et cetera? We're paying 400% more for dairy than we should because the government of Canada has sanctioned, this monopoly, to garner votes in Quebec. And, enough is enough.
So as I said, I thought there was a lot of time squandered in this interview on subject matter that was there to make Pierre look human.
I think you're right. I think it was all intentional.
And I don't doubt for a minute that there were parameters set for this interview, because it's rare for Joe Rogan to surrender the mic to the interviewee, and allow the interviewee to start quizzing him about his history in the UFC and his history as a wrestler. And
yeah,
that went into this for quite a while. But I was, in retrospect, when I listened to 2 hours and 38 minutes, I think was the actual length of this interview, I thought, why didn't he mention freedom of speech? Because we are literally potentially weeks away from losing our freedom of speech. And the worst bill isn't even up yet. We haven't got the Online Harms/Safety Act, whatever they're going to call it. But we have an online safety committee now censoring things, headed by a guy who founded the Anti-Hate Network, which we know is farcical. organization. And Bill C9 is on the verge of being passed and going to the Senate, which will rubber stamp it, and it's going to get royal assent probably within 3 weeks. And that's going to mean effectively the end of real free speech in Canada, and it's going to get worse. And I'm thinking, why, Pierre, are you not sounding the alarm that Canada is on the verge of losing its free speech? No, Alberta is a wonderful place. It's cold. You know, I don't hunt myself, but I have friends who are hunters. It's cold there. They're real patriotic. And you know, in Canada is a great place. It's, you know, we've got green carpets in the House of Commons, and we're losing our free speech. What the hell?
Right? No, and I can't criticize my buddy Mark on foreign soil. You know, and I couldn't come here during the last election because we're not allowed to leave Canada during an election, or we shouldn't leave during an election. You know, so for 100,000 votes or 200,000 votes, you couldn't fly down to Austin, Texas, and back in 12 hours or 14 hours. I mean, what a horse's ass. I mean, and we know why he didn't go to Austin, Texas during the election. Again, it's because he would actually have had to follow some other program than the idiotic program that Jenny Byrne laid out for him, which was to be just as critical of the President Trump in the United States as Mark Carney was, and to not call out, Trump and Trudeau, or I'm sorry, Carney and Trudeau for their blatant anti-Americanism and the constant sticking a finger in the eye of our closest friend and ally. You know, it's just ludicrous. And of course, and it cost him the election, because he was a gutless coward.
Well, I certainly think it did cost him the election, because he could never be anti-Trump enough to satisfy the elbows up crowd, and he was really getting a lot of his base angry every time he talked about Donald Trump that way, the United States that way. And he fell for it. Let's put it that. He fell for Mark Carney's trap. I think it was politically very, very silly. Politically, I think this was a smart move on his behalf. But I'm surprised. I guess I'm not. Maybe I shouldn't be. Somewhat surprised that you're heartened as much by this interview as you are, because you're telling me today that this is going to accelerate the number.
Oh yeah, it's certainly not going to hurt us. Like, it's not going to go. Pierre, for people that are that are in favor of independence in Alberta, or even people that are on the fence. Pierre Poilievre did a really good interview on Joe Rogan. I guess I should give up my idea of not having to pay any federal income tax in 2027. Right? Yeah, right. I mean, it doesn't move the needle at all against independence. And it just reminds people of how smarmy and dismissive and icky, Ottawa Federalist politicians are. Like, it's just icky, right? Like that smarmy, civics lesson and, all of the other crap that he was doing. I mean, it just makes most of us, just grossed out.
So what's the agenda for the rest of the year in terms of getting this referendum question on the ballot and getting people to vote for it in 2026?
Well, I mean, just keep doing more of what we're doing. I mean, right now we're pedal to the metal to get as many signatures as we can on the independence petition, right? Of course, one of the things that we're heartened by, is that there's no doubt that there is at least 1 million Albertans that are in favor of independence. I'd love to know who's doing Danielle Smith's polling, because she's repeated that number more than once. And she's actually said, there were as high as 42%. And I mean, the 42% number, that squares with not just that ECOS poll, but that Leger poll that was done right after the last federal election, when federal conservatives, 70% of federal conservatives last year would have supported independence. And if you think about the math on that, right, we had 60% of Albertans voted conservative in the last election. So if 70% of 60% would vote in favor of independence, that's a solid 42% of the Alberta population, right? And then let's take Danielle's 1 million person number. There's 1 million Albertans that are firmly in favor of independence. Well, only 1,778,000 Albertans voted in the last election, right? So 1 million of us, right, is 56% of the voting public of Alberta in favor of independence. And then Danielle said it could be as high as 1.5 million Albertans in favor of independence. Well, the math on that in terms of voter turnout in the last election would put us at 84%. So, obviously, we know we have a long way to go. We know that we have to, have a very structured and disciplined referendum campaign once we get into, the actual campaign itself in terms of our messaging and, and all of the rest of it, right? But, you know, the very fact of the matter is that we've got these, you know, that we've got this, we're confident that we have at least 1 million people that are now fervently in favor of Alberta independence that are going to be voting yes, because they've been radicalized by this petition campaign. The minute you sign your name on a document, you know, saying that you want to have a referendum on, do you agree that Alberta shall, cease to be a province in Canada to become an independent state? That's a very radicalizing act, right? People are signing their name to that. Hell yeah, get us out, right? And they have family and friends that they can talk to, even if they didn't sign. They've got other people that they're going to be dragging to the polls. Danielle's now agreed that we're going to have a separate ballot for our referendum question. So we're not going to be on a long list of other questions, which I think is helpful. We don't want any other questions being asked, but that's a fight we'll have after we get all of our signatures in, right? We think the only question that needs to be asked is, do you agree that Alberta shall cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state, right? All the other questions, as far as we're concerned, come under the heading of, do you agree that Danielle Smith should do her goddamn job, right? Because immigration, all this other stuff that, she ran on the Free Alberta strategy, which effectively encompassed all of the things that she wants to ask referendum questions about, right? So, we'll have that fight after we're done getting our petitions and move forward. But in the meantime, we're happy to see movement on Danielle's part that she's now going to give us a separate ballot for our question, which I think, she's required to in any event under Alberta election law. Because it's a constitutional referendum, not a policy question, and we're continuing to move forward, right? And anybody that's dismissing us or anybody that's suffering from Alberta independence derangement syndrome had better wake up, because they're going to wake up in complete shock on the 20th of October when Alberta's voted itself out of Canada.
Well, I think one of the things, and I was thinking about this while I was watching this interview, one of the best phenomena in your favor, and I think which could convince more people to endorse Alberta independence, is the fact that we have a government like Mark Carney, the most corrupt government in the history of Canada. And I don't know why Pierre Poilievre has never said that. Most corrupt government in history of Canada. This is a guy who's either 2 steps behind or 2 steps ahead Brookfield wherever he goes in the world. Brookfield's not far behind, or there's a contract for Brookfield, and people aren't even noticing this. And he's selling off our pensions. He's using the pension funds as leverage for trade deals. Once again, few people are noticing this or thinking it's a little bit weird. And he's 47% in the polls right now, 60% popularity.
Why isn't Pierre Poilievre calling for a police investigation, an RCMP investigation, into the $500 million that's allegedly going to a 2-person Inuit holding company belonging to the husband of, the woman that just crossed the floor from the NDP, right? Yeah. I mean, we all understand, you followed Canadian defense spending. Like, how does a bureaucrat within the Canadian government get the authority to write a check for $500 million to a 2-person holding company to build $500 million worth of housing when this company hasn't built ever one house in its history as a company? And of course, I'll tell you how this company is going to build. This is just get my crystal ball out and, and read the future. The way that company is going to spend $500 million on building houses in Inuvik is, lo and behold, Brookfield will come along. They'll partner with Brookfield. Brookfield will spend all of that money building, however many houses, however few houses they can get away with building to keep their profits up. And the husband of this MP will get, 10, 15, 20 million of the 500 or whatever they agree the right amount is, right? And then Brookfield, will pocket another $100 million in taxpayer money and pure profit while they build $200 or $300 million worth of houses. I mean, we all know how that's going to roll out, right? And very good. No police investigation. I mean, there needs to be a police investigation on the award of a $500 million contract to a 2-person holding company who just happens to be affiliated with somebody who just crossed the floor to, from the NDP to the Liberals. Why isn't Pierre screaming about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of baggage there. A lot of baggage attached to that MP. Yes. So Well, I'll leave it at that, Jeff. We're continuing to monitor the progress you're making and continuing to monitor Alberta politics. I think it's the barometer of the country. And it might be ultimately the only salvation of this country if it's going to have any democracy or freedom remaining. So thanks so much for your input.
Always a pleasure. I always love being able to update you and your viewers on what's going on in Alberta independence from a, from the actual, perspective of what's actually going on the ground, as opposed to all the people that just happen to be living in denial. So anyway, thanks again for having me on.
Thank you, Jeff. And stay in touch, and we'll have you back on again soon.
Always a pleasure, David. Thank you.
Bye for now. That was Jeff Rath, of course, one of the leading proponents of Alberta independence, and he's a regular. We'll have him back on again soon. We're going to show you the merchandise, and I got very important information to add here at the end.
Who cares?
Yeah, I want to remind you all, if you haven't read them yet, I got a lot of stuff up right now and want to talk about that. And I've got a super chat we will go to before the end of this. Well, no, let's go to that right now. Scotty, W8R, $5 super chat. Repopulation has a face. It's the face of impoverishment. We are still supposed to play along. Well, thank you for that gift of $5, Scotty. And thank you for your input. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for watching the show. Like I say, I have Jeff on because this is an issue we need to focus on. 42% support for Alberta independence. It's real, folks. It's real. And it can't be dismissed by just saying ain't going to happen. And don't believe that. So, but I want to go to a couple of stories I've written here and encourage you to read them. As you all know, I write for Blaze Media. And this is their lifestyle section called The Line. I write there about 4 or 5 times a month from a Canadian U.S. perspective. Canada's Conservative challenger Pierre Poilievre wins big on Joe Rogan's podcast. And regardless of what we just talked about, I think this was politically astute, very smart. And I think he did very well. There were no tough questions, really. There were no hardball questions, or these are all softball questions. He handled them very well. And it came across very well to the audience he needs to appeal to. So I stand by my assessment of being politically a very smart thing. I don't know why we didn't hear more about free speech. I don't know why we didn't hear more about other issues, but that certainly wasn't what he was there to talk about, was it? So, and one more to show you here. Human Events also talked about the issue here. David Creighton, Pierre Poilievre finally went on Joe Rogan's broadcast and show why he should lead Canada. Well, I think, regardless of what we just heard from Mr. Rath, I think Pierre Poilievre would, of course, be a better prime minister than Mark Carney. But I'm very disappointed that he thinks Pierre Poilievre thinks Mark Carney is fighting for Canada. I don't believe he is. So enough said about that. Now tomorrow, I'm really happy. Oh yes, and please hype this broadcast. Please hype this broadcast. Tomorrow, I've got the authors and the illustrator of The Sounds of Silence. This is a beautiful book that written by Sage and Bethany Lynn. And Sage was the illustrator. And I encourage you can get this on Amazon. It is a beautiful book. We'll be going over this tomorrow. And this was written after Sage and her mom, Bethany, visited Universal Ostrich Farms and saw the ostriches while they were still alive. And of course, like millions of us, were devastated when the CFIA massacred that herd and watched Katie and her mom collapse in tears. It was so sad. It was so sad. And I wasn't there. I wish I had been there, but I was up all night watching social media from folks who were there. And there were hundreds of people watching and suffering and being there to support this wonderful family of Katie and Karen. And it was a very, very emotional. And, you know, neither of them are still, they're still not entirely over this. Neither of them can say it's, oh, you know, life is back to normal. Of course it's not. And they still have to face the haters and the crazies and the paid bots from the CFIA and the people out there who accuse them of all kinds of ridiculous, horrible, slanderous activities and material that it's enough to make you nauseous. All they've been through, all they've had to endure, and there are still half-wits out there going on social media accusing them of, I'm not even going to say what they're accusing them of, but they're accusing them of horrible things that are just so incredibly stupid and untrue. I hope nobody's believing it. But I know when you look at the audience numbers in terms of what Katie is reaching and her mom, Karen, and what these bots are reaching, there's no comparison. The Universal Ostrich Farms are reaching 10, 100, 1,000 times as many people as these desperate bots who are working for the CFIA that's scared shitless that there's a lawsuit coming and they're going to lose it. They're going to lose it, folks. So tomorrow, don't miss this program with Sage and Bethany Lynn. It's a pleasure to have this young girl and her mom on the show because these are caring Canadians, passionate Canadians like the ones behind Universal Ostrich Farms. And I'm going to have it. It's going to be a pleasure just to talk to them and promote this book as much as I can. And you can get it on Amazon. Information will be in the description. So thank you so much for watching today. I think we hit all the bases. Thank you again for that super chat from Scotty. It's appreciated. Well, hell, I'm going to go to a few comments here because, yeah, we got time. We got time. Let's see here. Get involved, Canadians. Oh, Trees 14. I love your comments, Trees. You're always there every day. You're a regular. And thank you for saying that. I hope they figured out something good for the beluga whales in Marineland. Yeah. Another thing Mark Carney laughed about at the press gallery dinner, he laughed about the ostriches being murdered, massacred. And he said, what about those beluga whales? Oh, how do I deal with that? Yeah. Yeah. Separatist memes for conservative Alberta drag queens. Love it. Looks like Jeff Rath. Yeah. P. Rabbit Poye. Now, it's a pleasure to share your... Oh, very, very good. Lady Genuine 0477, another regular on the show. You comment every day. I love your comments. They were probably eating ostrich at the dinner. Yeah, probably. And of course, as you know, selling the ostriches for meat, they were being used in scientific to gain scientific data. Oh, we have another super chat. I can't believe this. This is no. Buy the book on Amazon. I'm not seeing it here, but we'll show it. We'll show it tomorrow if we have it. I'm not seeing it here. I'm just seeing Scotty's. But we do have another super chat, and I'm okay. The other start is me. Buy the book on Amazon. So anyway, and we do, of course, we have some new stickers, ostrich related, and a new hoodie. I got to show this to you. because and we're going to be sending one of these hoodies to Sage. And we just got this in the mail yesterday. This is the new ostrich hoodie. And I don't know if Sage or Beth are watching today. This is coming in the mail. I hope this is your size. It'll be a little big for you, Sage, but that's how we wear them. This is the new ostrich hoodie. And wear it in good health, and God bless you for the book you've created and the people you have reached. We appreciate it. Everything you've done. So I think that's about it for the show. We've gone over the hour mark. We don't often do that. Thanks so much for watching. God bless all of you on this Sunday. Godspeed to all you do. Bye for now. All right. Oh. Thanks. There it is. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I am going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Crayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.